Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles Sabansu, and welcome you guys to another episode of the DREAMERSPRO show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and where we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see it. And today we have a very interesting show in store for you guys. Before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into this topic here. This is a very interesting one. As you guys know, the world of sports is very fast-paced, right? Very fast-paced, especially when you're covering it. Right. When you're covering sports, I mean, you always have to be dialed in. If you're not first, you're last. And there's this constant stream of information usually. So you always have to be ready to report it. That's really what it is. Like literally, that's what it is. And it's a very, very taxing thing. Anybody producing content, covering sports, you guys know what it is. Especially if you're producing content daily. Right. But then you have those that not only are talking about it daily, you have those that are actually looking for stories, investigate, and it gets even harder. And that's the reason why probably the biggest guy in sports media, at least in the United States, who covers the NBA and all of that breaks news, Adrian Wojnarowski, just decided to resign abruptly. Actually, I want to read a comment, rather his statement that he put out about his retirement, and we want to read what he posted on Twitter. He said, "I grew up the son of a factory worker 2 miles from ESPN's campus, only ever dreamed of making a living as a sports writer. 37 years ago, the Hartford Courant gave me my first byline, and I never stopped chasing the thrill of it all. This craft transformed my life, but I've decided to retire from ESPN and the news industry. I understand the commitment required in my role, and it's an investment that I'm no longer driven to make. Time isn't an endless supply, and I want to spend mine in ways that are more personally meaningful. I leave with overwhelming gratitude for countless mentors and colleagues, subjects and stories, readers and viewers. No one has benefited more than me from the belief, trust, and generosity of others. The past 7 years at ESPN have been a particular privilege. I'm appreciative of the company's leadership, especially Jimmy Pitaro and Christian Douglas, for the understanding and acceptance of my decision to make a life change. After all these years reporting on everyone's team, I'm heading back to my own." Those were Adrian Wojnarowski's comments. And at the time, people were sending us the story, Woj retired, Ward retired, what do you think about it, blah, 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 blah. And at the time I was like, well, yeah, he retired. I'm not really sure, how much of a story there is to that apart from just reporting on the story. But then as time went on, I thought back to an interview I saw about a month or two ago of Chris Broussard on a show called The House of Straws, where he was essentially talking about the time he was essentially approached by ESPN to take on this Adrian Wojnarowski kind of role. And he was talking about, the time he was helped breaking the story of LeBron James going to the Miami Heat. And after he went through that, he just made a decision at that time where he said, this type of job is just way too stressful for me. And there's no way I would want to continue doing this. And I was like, wow. I think back to what Chris said, and then you now see Adrian Wojnarowski just abruptly retiring. I was like, wow, he must have been onto something. So these are the comments that we want to get into. But before we even get into what Chris Broussard had to say, today's video is brought to you by our sponsor, PrizePicks, which is a large daily fantasy sports platform in North America. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks makes it easy to get real money action on sports and players you love. Pick more or less on 2 or more players in any sport to win up to 100 times your entry fee. For example, here's a possible winning player projection lineup: Tyreek Hill for more than 90 receiving yards and Dak Prescott for more than 263 passing yards, Josh Allen for less than 240 passing yards, and CeeDee Lamb for more than 96 receiving yards. And if you're like me and you want to play safe, you will love the new features PrizePicks invented: Flex Plays. Flex Pays are the safest way to play PrizePicks. You can still make a profit or win some money back even if a couple of your picks don't hit. On top of this, PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And remember, whenever you support this sponsor, you're supporting this channel. Thank you. So what we want to do now, I want to play exactly what Chris Broussard had to say on the House of Straws, and then want to come back and continue on with the show. Take a listen to Chris Broussard here.
What was the decision like for you? Because we've never had that conversation. I'm curious because I have this recollection that you were far out ahead of that, reporting that LeBron was going to Miami. And from my recollection, there was just so much pressure on that and what it was going to be. And I think, were you part? I mean, this is poor research done by me. You might have even been part of the decision special. Do I have that right? Yes.
I was not part of their special, but as you know, like you said, I was doing around the clock reporting on that, and so that was a great time, to be honest. I think back with fondness to that time. So it was 2010, of course, and as you know, that was the story of the decade, or at that, even the century at that point, because it was early in the 2000s. And since then, almost every summer has had, big time free agents that everybody followed. But at that point, it wasn't a first, but the magnitude of it had not been seen before. And so my thinking was, man, this is really a chance to separate myself. And so I was working around the clock for those 3 weeks or so. I was just working around the clock. And it even got to the point where ESPN, because I was getting good information, was having me on almost all day. Like I would go in, there were many days where I would go in to be on Mike and Mike in the morning in the 6 o'clock a.m. hour. And I would be at the studio in Bristol until like midnight. Because they will want me on the evening Sports Center and then the afternoon Sports Center and ESPN News and all of that. And so that really did help my career as well, because I was getting a lot of news. And then they put me on the NBA Countdown show with Magic Johnson, John Barry, and Michael Wilbon. And that was big. We were out in L.A. So that did help my career a lot. Now, the interesting thing is once I did, well covering that story, I felt like it wasn't spoken, but I felt like ESPN started looking at me like, oh, this guy's going to be our Adam Schefter of the NBA. And I never wanted to be that. I worked around the clock for those 3 weeks, but I didn't want to work around the clock for 350 days a year. Yeah. Real talk. And so they kind of viewed me in that role. I never said anything like, hey, I don't want to do that. So I just kind of let it flow. And then, they started looking at me to break all these stories. And I really wasn't I was working and I was putting in my work, but I wasn't working like a Woj or a Shams around the clock all day, every day. And I wasn't breaking news like they were.
Yeah, I mean, that lifestyle is impossible. And I remember what the ESPN news desk was like, Chris, and I wasn't even a newsbreaker, but if there was some news from a practice with the Warriors, they were angry at me that I didn't do what they wanted to do. Right. And it's a pressure. I mean, there's a Washington Post article from about 2 years ago on Schefter and how he lives his life. And he gets paid $9 million a year. But I came away from it going, that is not worth it. That's not worth it. People might think it's worth it. I mean, there are probably people listening who have a job that they absolutely hate who go, yeah, I would want to be on TV and famous and breaking stories. But when you actually read about Schefter's life, that's a mental prison, man. He is in a state of forever vigilance and fear and consumption.
So you heard what Chris Broussard had to say, right? You even heard what the gentleman who's interviewing him said as well about, you're getting paid $9 million a year and all of this. And people are like, I'll do a job for $9 million. But he's like, you don't understand just how taxing it is. It's very taxing, right? It's very, these kind of, and I've never done it at that level, but it's very, very taxing because you're 100% dialed in. And I don't think it's just news. I think it's, sports. I think it's news in general. You're always locked in. So even when you're not producing content, or even when you're not searching about content, you're constantly thinking about content, right? You're constantly thinking about it. So your mind is barely at rest, barely. And after a while, it becomes taxing. And people experience burnout and all of that. It can be very, very taxing. And it gets to the point where that $9 million that you're seeing, obviously before taxes, but that $9 million figure that you're seeing, yeah, you're making it. But the question is, are you enjoying it? Because if you're spending the majority of your time at work, away from your family, so the $9 million, what's the utility? Now, some people obviously try to console themselves and say, well, I can take care of my family and all. Yeah, I want to take care of my family, but I also want to take care of myself. Yeah. Like if I can help it and earn a good salary, yes, I'll take. If the necessity is, okay, I need this money to take care of my family, give them a good life, and it requires me to just give up so much of my time, fine. But if I can help it and give them a good life still, but then also have a good life for myself, then I will take the latter. And what people don't forget is people in many cases trade their well-being for money. And I can understand putting yourself through stress and all of that to make money. But then there's a point where it's like, okay, this is becoming stupid. Because if you start trading your health, your mental health and all of that for a bag, quote unquote, then you're really working against yourself. Because at a certain point, that money, my brother, that money, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. Now, obviously, this position may be controversial. I don't care. Right? I believe in being 100% locked in what you're doing. But you also have to have some type of balance as well. For instance, we do a show. Before years, we would do a show every day, Monday to Sunday, every day. We did that for years. And we finally found a way to take off one day a week. And then we finally found a period where we could take off like a week, a year, like 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And I realized that 6, 7, 8 day period did more for me than anything. Right. And yes, you lose money during that period because you're not producing content, but the money you lose, but the peace of mind and the relaxation and your ability to recharge is greater than the money you lost. Right. So there has to be a balance. And Chris Broussard quickly realized, like, look, I can't do this. And Chris Broussard is a family man as well. Right. Chris Broussard is married. He does have kids. And when you have those responsibilities, it makes things a little bit different. So I can understand that. Yes. No one is saying don't go out there and bust your tail and make your money and all of that, but you also have to be mindful of it all, right? You have to be especially when you have kids, because kids, yes, I have a roof over my head and all that, but when they want to spend time with you and go to the park with you, they're not thinking about the roof over their head. They're just thinking about, why isn't dad or mom not here? Unfortunately, we as parents, sometimes we forget that, but no one is perfect. But I definitely understand where Chris Broussard is coming from. It's a crazy life to do that type of thing where you're always dialed in 100%, 100. It can be stressful. So I totally get it. And I don't think he said anything controversial there. And I understand Woj's decision because it must have been a very, very stressful job to do. So these are my thoughts. What I want to know from you guys, what side of this issue, or what side of the issue are you on? Are you pro, like, man, just go 100% full board, just whatever, and you sleep when you're dead, as some people say? Or do you believe that you can be smart about how you work and design your life in a way where you can get a lot out of it, but then also enjoy some time for yourself and for your family? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. We catch you guys on the next show. Peace.